Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Winning Ticket, presented by DRF Sportsbook. Want to let all of you know, if you're in the state of Iowa, you need to sign up for a DRF Sportsbook account so you can play along with us with all these great football games that we're talking about. You see how I looked around like there was us, like you and I were actually here together. I'm sitting alone in my living room right now. Nobody else is around, but the us, that's you, that's me, that's all of us playing these games. And it feels great, Eric. Like we're now in the swing of football season, both college and NFL. We've got sample sizes now to work with for both. We've got more than just one game. So now we're starting to get a feel for who some of these teams are, as we encourage all of you to sign up for our account at DRF Sportsbook and use the promo code FAST350. It can get you all the way up to a $350 deposit match bonus. Eric, this is one of the best college football weekends on paper as far as good teams playing against each other than I can remember. Always a couple of them every year, but wow, we're going to talk about 6 or 7 games that on paper have really, really important implications for teams that maybe want to win their conferences or make it to a playoff.
Loaded. Notre Dame, Ohio State's really big. How does Alabama respond after that lackluster showing against South Florida?
It's a big day in the Pac-12, right? We'll get a little look at the hierarchy there, as we have, I think, 3 games that are of national intrigue in the Pac-12, and it's not going to be the Pac-12 very much longer, but yeah, just awesome college slate. And so this week, what we're going to do is we're just going to preview all of those big games together. We'll talk about how we're betting those games. We'll look at the lines. Then we'll flip on over to NFL. Eric's got 3 best bets. I have three best bets for the weekend. And then we'll both talk a little bit about Sunday Night Football and the 2 Monday Night Football games that they're continuing to do right now. Eric, we have a lot of ground to cover, my friend. Let's get right on into it. 13 ACC title appearances in the last 14 years combined for these 2 teams. They have combined for 11 of the last 12 ACC titles. We're going to have an early game on Saturday morning. It's going to be Florida State at Clemson. Florida State comes off a real scare last week. Their quarterback had an injury, but he did get back up and finish the game. We wonder how healthy he is. They had a 2-point win over Boston College as 25-point favorites. It was supposed to be a hurricane game, so you wonder if their game plan might have been to just sort of keep it close to the vest, especially with the big game at Clemson on deck. But once they were in a game, they didn't really make adjustments. They kind of got beat up in that game, Eric. They had lots of guys dealing with the flu. That's another point I will make, so keep that in mind. But Boston College had 18 penalties in that game for 131 yards. That's why Florida State won. Boston College had more total yards, more passing yards, more rushing yards. They were better on 3rd and 4th down. They won the time of possession by almost 7 minutes. And the defense for Florida State only had a 15% pressure rate. They allowed 4.5 yards per carry. So while this team is super talented, they've got tons of NFL talent all over the offense. Top running back prospect on PFF's big boards, one of the best of them. They've got a couple great wide receivers, a top 5-ish tight end. But the offense hasn't been able to play a complete game yet, Eric. We saw them held scoreless for a big portion of that game, like 15 minutes last week. But then we saw a few weeks ago against LSU, they score 6 straight times. And then they go 1 of 9 on 3rd down last week. Which team are we going to get?
Yeah, it's an interesting game. Obviously, the big thing is the health of Jordan Travis, the QB. One big thing to note is Dabo, the coach of Clemson, is 73% ATS when he's a dog against opponents in the top 20. Clemson offense, it's getting better. The big thing that I've noticed watching it is Shipley, the running back, has no touchdowns. Maybe a prop to look to play is for him to get into the end zone. Obviously, they need to get him going. Just a sleepy spot for FSU last week. I really am not going to take too much away from that.
Too much out of that.
the Kipnick, the QB of the Clemson Tigers, I'm really not that big of a fan of. And I really don't know if Clemson's DBs are going to be able to cover Clowney and Wilson.
But they're not like, they haven't been overly impressive. That's my concern about this game. Like, I would normally want to play Clemson here at home in this situation. I just don't know if like they have the type of offense that can hit the Florida State secondary. Like the secondary's had consistent breakdowns. The defense has been really bad in EPA per rush. Clemson, maybe in that instance, they've got 24 runs of 10 plus yards this year. So that might be where they hit them, right, against the run. But I don't know if Clemson's going to be able to have a balanced enough offense. Like you said, I just haven't been quite as impressed with the quarterback. Clemson's number 115 in red zone offense. They have a kicker that's missed 3 field goals and an extra point. And remember, they've looked good the last couple of weeks, right? Like they beat up on inferior opponents the last few weeks, but when they played a tougher opponent with like Duke, they got beat up.
Yeah. It's just Duke's really good. Duke's defense is really good. You can kind of see that coming because Clemson was implementing a new offense. Florida State, you take out the last quarter against LSU, they really haven't looked that impressive. To me, this is just a pass. I don't want anything to do for this game. Maybe play Shipley TD, but I'm sure that prop's going to be juiced really low. This is just kind of a sit back and kind of wait and kind of watch for me.
Apologies if the connection was getting a little spotty for a second or two. I was getting blurry. I promised I haven't started drinking early quite yet, Eric. Haven't gotten that blurry yet. We'll see maybe a little later on tonight. But we continue on. So do you have a strong play in here? Around this number, I don't. I would maybe, I would wait a little bit because I will say I do think, and coming into this year, I was very high on Florida State overall, and I'm not too far removed from that, but I have been a little disappointed watching them in spots. I thought they'd be a little bit more of a well-oiled machine right now, sort of like what you see with the top 5 to 10 teams in the country, right? They just have had spots where they don't look like they've got it all figured out quite yet. But I'm worried about Clemson being the team to take advantage of that. I don't know if they are.
It's tough to trust Florida State, like you said. Also, Clemson hasn't given us anything where we can really trust them. There's a lot of football. There's no need to rush bets. If you have a sound side, just kind of wait for your next spot.
Okay, Eric, let's move to the first of 3 Pac-12 games we're going to be talking about today. How about this? Utah -6 versus UCLA. So this number has to be a Cam Rising number, right? We'd imagine that he's going to be showing up. Their quarterback who has been out with a torn ACL. Him and the tight end both have been out, and they're both absolute studs. And so it's hard to get a sense of what this offense will look like, or it's hard to really judge the offense before these guys come back into it because it's going to look different. They haven't looked great. The offensive line hasn't been getting a ton of push, really. This is always the game that he was targeting to come back. This Utah defense, for both of these teams, it's going to be a step up for them, for their defenses based on what the other team's offense will be able to do, right? Because UCLA has played some really inferior opponents, but UCLA does have a good offense. Like with Chip Kelly, you can expect them to be potent. They'll be able to have some explosive plays. The QB Moore, they really like him. He's going to be tested. This is a big road spot for him, but he's looked good so far. For Utah, it's not going to be the easiest of spots for Rising to come back and make his return, playing against a UCLA team that defensively, they're not fantastic, but they're at least a Power 5, like legitimate team. It's not like one of those first couple games where he could have gotten a real sort of soft game in. Tell us what you think about, Rising for sure. He's going to be back playing. How like good do you expect him here? Looks like he's practiced at least a week and a half without limitations. How do you get a sense for this game?
I mean, obviously the tough thing is Winningham's done this before, where he doesn't really name a quarterback. We really have no idea who's playing the quarterback. Obviously, with the line movement suggests that Rising is going to play, but we've seen this before where this has happened in a game with Utah where there's this line movement and boom, Rising's not out there. So it's really hard for me to lay this big number. Moore has been getting the majority of the reps, but they have been rotating multiple guys in there. He is a freshman. Utah is a very polarizing place to play.
Oh, it's a tough place to play, man.
All that crowd noise.
And it's homecoming. They're going to be going like big. And if he's back, that crowd's going to be really up for him coming back. They're going to be challenged. And they are 1-7 on the road recently against ranked teams. And the teams they played so far, an FBS team and teams that are ranked 99 and 115 in the Pro Football Focus power rankings.
Yeah.
Just not good teams.
And I mean, something can be said about Utah. There's not many teams that can go in, beat Florida and beat Baylor starting 2-0 without their best player, their starting quarterback.
Agreed.
Running backups out there. This is a very disciplined team. They're not going to make mistakes. I'm a little worried about their defensive line. Their defensive line isn't as better as it's been historically. Yeah. UCLA does really lean on that run game. If they're able to lean on that run game, take pressure off of Moore, that's going to be obviously their path to victory.
Because that's the key spot. If UCLA wins the game, they run the ball well, right? Their offensive line gets a really nice push, and that's how they're dominant. Like that seems like to me one of the key matchups of this game.
What then that will open stuff up for Moore. What's the rust Rising? He hasn't been playing. This is going to be his first game back since suffering that big knee injury. What does he look like? Kelly as a dog ATS in the Pac-12 is 56%. At this number, I don't want anything to do with it. If this keeps on going up, if this gets up,
I would jump at 7 to UCLA.
I would look to get in, but just kind of
I would jump at 7 UCLA. I'd maybe even jump at 7. Like if Utah scored really quickly, I might jump at UCLA live because maybe they come up. Utah gets a lot of momentum right away, and then it might be a little bit difficult, right? Like they might have a great script right out of the box, come on flying on all cylinders, but then they might get worn down a little bit, or Rising might get kind of up, and then maybe we'll see if he doesn't have the chemistry quite yet with everyone. Really interesting game. I would lean UCLA as the number gets bigger, just because I think it feels like the type of game that Utah wins late and takes advantage of that home field that we're talking about. So I would lean UCLA at this point.
I got some Utah futures going on.
So yeah, you're involved already.
Get going here. I'm just going to kind of sit back and kind of see how it plays out.
Utah, UCLA, one of 3 big games in the Pac-12 this weekend. The next one is Oregon and Colorado. So we'll go Oregon, Colorado, and then we'll go Bama next. I think I was a little out of order when we talked about them, Eric. But let's talk Oregon, Colorado, and then we'll talk about Bama coming up next. So Colorado, everybody was up late except for Eric watching that game last week against the Colorado State, because it was past your bedtime, no doubt about it. But
dude, I was out.
You're asleep. But it was the books haven't had any clue how to price Colorado so far this year, because in game 1 against TCU, they're a 25-point dog. They win the game straight up. Week 2 and then week 2 against Nebraska, I guess it was close. It was a little closer, but last week they're a 25-point favorite and they have to go into overtime and they almost lose that game. So we've been all over as far as like where Colorado's been priced. They've actually lost 31 straight games against top 15 opponents, but this isn't that same Colorado, right? They got beat up last week, though. That was really an eye-opening game. I mean, Colorado State had 499 yards of total offense. They won the time of possession by almost 10 minutes. They had 17 penalties for 182 yards and 4 turnovers. And they still went to overtime in that game. Colorado only scored on 1 of their first 10 offensive drives. They struggled early against Nebraska, who kept turning it over. Colorado was only 4 of 13 on third down. Colorado State was 10 of 20. their two-way player, Travis Hunter. Nobody ever likes to see someone get hurt, but this is something that you pointed out. You weren't rooting for him to get hurt. It was a cheap shot too. It wasn't like even a play in the middle of the game. But I think your point was the more snaps you're out there, the more likelihood there is for you to get hurt. And when you're playing both ways, there's just a reason why. Same thing we see with Shohei Ohtani. There's a reason why a lot of people haven't tried to pitch and hit, because there's just an opportunity for you to get hurt more often when you do both sides.
Yeah, more opportunity for, something to happen. The thing I look at this is a couple things. I saw a tweet from one book that tweeted out the biggest exposure. So that's basically what the majority of the bets are on. Number one was Colorado plus a 21. Number two is Colorado money line, which is really rare. We really don't see that. Hunter is out, and obviously with him not being there, this kind of exploits the secondary. He was such a he's phenomenal. He's legit. Like, you can look at him and you can say, look, he's in the league. He's going to be playing at the next level. I think losing him is going to be big for this back four. But at the end of the day, I don't think it matters, because when I look at their defensive line, I don't think they're going to be able to stop Oregon's rushing attack. I think Oregon's going to have their way rushing the ball. You look at Bo Nix's splits, home and away, much comfortable playing at home. I think he's going to throw the ball. The Oregon coach was very Colorado when it came out. They were leading for the Big 12. So I think that I think Oregon's going to look to make a statement here. Also, something else to remember is game one, they played TCU. There was absolutely no film on this offense. No one knew what they were going to do. No. TCU kind of went in blind. They're replacing a lot of players. Game
Since then, slow starts in both games.
Sims was a turnover machine. And
they would have been up by 10, 14 points early. Nebraska
Colorado State should have won that game. And another thing, I saw someone tweeted this out, and this is a great point, and I expect Deion will probably change it because he is a smart guy next year, is kind of tone down the schedule, because it just seems like every single week there's a game they got to get up for.
Yeah. It's going to be hard. And you could tell this week they're not talking quite as much, or they're not pumping it up quite as much. It's a little bit different. I think they know this is because now they go Colorado, USC, and their next 6 games in a row are just brutal.
It's just a tough thing.
It is. And the depth for them, this is where we were going to worry about them, because Deion did a fantastic job of getting a bunch of guys in there quickly that are good. Like, they have some good talent with the starters. But then as soon as they get past that first layer of starters into the depth, they don't have that yet. That takes a couple years to build with recruits getting guys in. And so that's what concerns me. I mean, their offense has been amazing. 41.3 points per game. But the defense has allowed more than 30 points per game. And they grade as a bottom 10 Power 5 defense and a bottom 5 Power 5 run defense. So let's think about that. I
know Deion's been great. And
he has.
I'm not, with this comment, I'm not trying to take anything away from Deion. But when you look, he's got Charles Kelly from Alabama as his DC implementing stuff.
Yep.
They brought in, Sean Lewis from Kent State. And what he was able to do at Kent State those first couple years, they were moving the ball against SEC schools with the offense that he installed. So he built a good staff, was
a great staff.
Kids in. I just kind of think like next year, it's going to be a different start in terms of opponents to the season.
Yeah. So again, it's a really bad matchup for them right now at this point of the season. When you just had an overtime game, you're a little bit beat up. You're now going to have to, like, your biggest weakness is your run defense.
Yeah.
And now you're going to have to play a team that's got the 4th best rushing grade in the country. They are number 2 in the nation in EPA, and they have the 4th best pass blocking grade. Like, the one thing we know about Oregon every year is their offense is a well-oiled machine, especially at home.
Yeah.
Like, I have a hard time counting how many stops Colorado is going to get here, right?
I think they're really going to struggle stopping everything.
That's
to be honest with
they
you.
can look good offensively, but I just don't know how many times they're going to be able to stop this Oregon team that's really, really good offensively. So, yeah, I mean, I'm almost always going to tell someone to play a big dog. This is not one I would tell you to play in this game. I'm not going and laying 22 with Oregon, but like if I was going to play this game, I think Oregon's team total I saw is like 44. That's really high, but
this is a weird thing when the public side is the dog.
Is the 20-point dog. I know, it's very weird because you wonder how much that's built into the number at all, like what this number would have been if things were slightly different, like if they lose last week, or if it's the same group of guys without sort of that extra Dion buzz, you know? I don't know, but I agree. This is a bad matchup for them with Oregon. This doesn't feel like TCU week 1 either, because TCU was a team that coming into the year we thought was going to be a little less than what the national narrative was. They lost a ton. And they were a little bit lucky, not lucky, but they were very fortunate last year. We saw what happens with the Minnesota Vikings this year, right? You get all the bounces one year, and then all of a sudden twice this year, the Vikings have lost 2 games that they probably would have won last year. Correct. You know, same sort of thing with TCU when they started this year. So I'm looking at the games that Colorado has played, and man, their over-under was 3.5. Like, they're way ahead of schedule, and Dion deserves a lot of the love that he's getting, and most of it. This could be a bad week, though, for them. And if it's not, man, power to them. If they play well without Hunter and they're able to keep this game close, that means he is really ahead of schedule. And I'm not going to put my money there quite yet. Where do we head next, Eric? Let's go Bama and Ole Miss. Big game here. Bama, this one's kind of danced around the 6.5-ish 7 number, but this is the first time since 2015 that Alabama enters a game ranked outside the top 10.
Yep.
They played South Florida last week, and South Florida almost had 100 yards rushing. It was a very sleepy Alabama win by just 14. And what's scary is, I guess we could say it's a trap game because it was between 2 big games, but Alabama usually doesn't do that, where they go and beat up on the inferior opponents. And the problem is they've got a lot to work on right now, right, Eric? Like, they've got a new quarterback. They've got offensive line problems. Like, they're not the type of team that can afford to have down games or trap games, or like, they need to be up right now trying to figure things out. They only scored 17 points. That interior defensive line hasn't been their normal self. The new OC Reese, he's been struggling. They rank number 91 right now in EPA per pass. They've had 37% of their runs stuffed through 3 games. They only have 30% of their rushing yards before contact. They're 118th in sack rate allowed. They're allowing a sack on 32% of blitzes. 1 out of 3 times, boom, here comes the sack. They had a players-only meeting this week. Never good early in the year. I was listening to the guys on the Bet the Board podcast. They do a fantastic job breaking games down and stuff. This was a quote that Todd Furman read from an article that Nick Scarborough and ESPN wrote. Receivers are not creating enough separation. The offensive line is allowing too much pressure in the backfield, and getting a snap from the backfield has turned into an adventure. The running game is inconsistent at best, and players across the board are committing too many penalties. The offense across the board doesn't seem to have any identity or direction. That was written about Alabama. Yeah, that's crazy. You know, like,
when you think about it,
it is. That sounds like a team that's like at the bottom of the college football, getting ready to fire their coach. But it does show you that this group right now isn't the same kind of Alabama team that we're used to at this point of the year. Not to say Saban can't switch some things. He's already going to make another change, right? They're going to go back to Milroe here again.
So this is what I was told. I was told that Saban and Reese aren't getting along.
Right? It seems like it.
Disappointed. And Saban, that kind of led to the weird quarterback play in the South Florida. Saban was just kind of like, look, we're going with what's the guy Milrow.
Yep.
He gives us the best chance.
He can at least run.
But the thing is when you watch Reese call plays, where's the RPO?
Yep.
You know, the way the offense should be with Milrow back there isn't what
it's very Bearsy.
Yep.
It's the Chicago Bears.
But you know, betting's about buying low and selling high. This is the lowest point of Alabama.
Yeah.
And you have Nick Saban, who is 28-2 versus former assistants. You have teams that are starting 3-0 and 3-0 ATS playing as dogs on the road. First conference game, only 43% APS. Now you kind of look at Ole Miss, their best team they played was Tulane. Some late weird scoring at the end.
Tulane, it was closer. It was closer than it looked.
With a backup quarterback.
Yeah.
Same thing in the Georgia Tech. So it's not like they've been this
juggernaut.
Dart has had some stuff where he's looked good. Kiffin, I thought he'd be better as a dog. He's just straight 50%, right down the middle, 50%. I really don't want anything to do with this game. This game started 11 when numbers kind of reopened. It was north. It was around the 11 number.
And then it went down to the 6-ish and it's settled back up here.
I want nothing to do with this.
Eric, what's scary to me about this game is just like what you were saying, in handicapping this game, I felt like what you said, Alabama feels like at a low point to me. And that's scary. When I'm looking at this game and I'm going, wow, like Mississippi offense averages 52 points per game. They should be able to hit some big plays against the Bama defense that showed flaws against Texas. Dart has been good, as you mentioned. You've got a former Alabama defensive coordinator who was there for 5 years. So he knows a lot of what Alabama does. He probably knows Milrow very well and things that might bother him or maybe good ways to attack him. I don't, it just scares me because I want to play Ole Miss so bad. Is 7 and above, I would be okay with it. You talked about how the number has moved, and if you hadn't gotten it, it's moved quite a bit. But yeah, it scares me, man. It really does because.
But the thing is, like, sometimes the best bet is no bet.
Yeah, no, and because this is one of those games where if Alabama loses this game, they are in serious trouble, right? Like this is like they're going to feel different, but they still should be able to move the ball a lot better here. For Ole Miss, Judkins didn't look great last week. I don't know how healthy he is. He didn't look fantastic. I think they came to get him that game out of the way before coming back here, but that doesn't mean you're just going to automatically be healthier, right? Like he didn't look great. And then the wide receivers are a little banged up. They should be healthier. They've got a tight end transfer who hasn't played. So like some really good pass catchers. And the major questions are the back part of their defense. The defensive front has been pretty good for Ole Miss. I think they have 10 sacks, which has been very good. And Alabama's offensive line allowed 5 sacks last week. But now when they switch to Milrow, should he run away from more of these sacks? And in these big games, you see the running quarterbacks tend to run a little bit more to make plays, pick up big first downs when they need to.
Yeah.
Man, I so bad want to play Ole Miss, but I don't think I can do it because it's scaring me. It's scaring me.
We lost the number. We're just going to move on and look to play something else.
We head back to the Pac-12 for another fun game. These are two teams that might be a little under the national radar, Eric, but these are two pretty good football teams we're going to talk about next in Oregon State and Washington State. Last year, Oregon State should have beat USC. When USC was up there, it was just a really, really like ball bouncing for USC a couple different times throughout that game. These two teams have played 108 times. This is the first time when they've ever both been ranked. Ever. That is nuts. 108 times, and they've never both been in the top 25 until this year. And these are the last two standing, Eric. This is the Pac-2. We got the Pac-2 game going today because everybody else in the Pac-12 has a home except for these two teams.
Yep.
They don't have anywhere else to go, which is so weird because like they're good right now. Like, right, we're talking about, they're both pretty good. And Oregon State in the last few years, they even had a basketball team make the Elite Eight a couple of years ago. So we're talking about a program, a sports program that's definitely been more successful than many others. But it's all about coaching. These two teams and these programs have been able to turn around because of coaching staffs that came in and that were able to right the ship. For Oregon State, they had their first 10-win season in more than 15 years last year. They've won 10 of their last 11 games. And what they're going to do, Eric, they're going to try to line up right at you with that big offensive line, and they're going to try to pound it and come right at you and beat you in the trenches. They have one of the top 5 offensive lines in the country. Some places have them ranked as high as 3 for their offensive line. It's really that good. Their run blocking grade is top 5 among Power 5 teams on PFF. They have a stud running back who's 100 yards in each of his games. He is averaging 8.6 yards per attempt. He's, I think, 4th highest rushing grade this year. And their quarterback, DJ, who transferred over from Clemson, while he's not one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and he still has some flaws, he's definitely a step up from the quarterback play that Oregon State's had in prior years, So getting him to come in was a major boon for them. Like, that's a big deal for this team. They're a 3-point favorite on the road playing Washington State. Their defense is good. They have 12 sacks through the first three games. I'd say their secondary, probably the weakness, probably where you try to attack them. They haven't really been tested very much in their first couple games, Oregon State secondary. So, and because they're good inside in the trenches, I think you'd maybe want to go that direction. For Washington State, that's sort of fine for them because they can't run the ball anyways, right? They're pretty one-dimensional. They're just going to try to come at you and throw the ball. Cam Ward has been much better with this new offensive coordinator. Their OC, he's 27 years old. Super young dude that came in, and he's really relating to the players. They've got a good offense now. They have 3 wide receiver transfers. The question I have is for them on the defensive side, Washington State. Can they stop Oregon State if Oregon State's just lining up and pounding and running at them? Can they stop the run? Can they put some pressure on DJ? They've been okay against the run so far, but they have not faced a line like they'll face here with this Oregon State team. That's kind of how I saw some of the key matchups in this game. Talk to us about what you see in this one.
I played Washington State here. I bet this game. I took them at +3. Beavers like to run the ball. You kind of look at Washington State this year. They've been pretty good against the run going into the season. The defense.
I think only 2.6 yards per attempt they've allowed.
Their front 4 was one of the strengths of the defense. Now you look at the Beavers. Back 4 is their weakness. Ward, who's the quarterback, transferred in. I think he's going to be able to take advantage of the issues that they have. You look at the Beavers, UC Davis, San Jose State. Who have they played? Washington State's a little more battle tested. I think Colorado State is.
Colorado State showed us, and Wisconsin.
They beat Wisconsin at home. I have never been a big DJU guy.
No,
I've never been. He's got some holes in his game. Are you really going to trust him to lead a drive? You look at Washington State at home as a conference dog. They are 56% against the number. Who's the best team in the Pac-12? Let's take USC out of the equation and look at everyone else minus USC. That goes up to 59%. So historically in the spot, they do cover. Ward, 9 TDs to 0 INTs to start the season. This is the 6th highest team in college football. I just don't know if Oregon State, with the way they play, and if DJU starts struggling, are they going to be able to score enough points? And in college, we need to remember there's all these situational spots. Beavers have a primetime game against Utah next week. This is a spot where they could be looking ahead going into there. So look, I'm going to take Oregon State home here.
Or Washington State, home dog.
Washington plus the points.
It's one of those fascinating matchups of just who's going to be able to impose their will in this game. Yep. Right? You were pointing it out. If Washington's able to really attack the secondary, or Washington State is, and they're able to turn this into an up and down game, that's probably not what Oregon State wants to do, because then you put the ball in DJ's hands a little more than you'd like. I think, like, as I mentioned, he's a step up for them, but they want to hand the ball off. They want to be a Martinez team. That's what you want. And then if DJ needs to make a pass, or you can use his legs a little bit, he can make a play for you if he has to, but you want to lean on that run. So can they impose their will, or will Washington State be able to? Like, this would be the type of game where either of these teams gets up by like 10, it might be very tough for the other team to come back like double digits, because Washington State can throw a little bit more. But if Oregon State can just run and bleed the clock and pick up first downs and with the new, then it might be tough. Oregon State, on the flip side, they don't want to have to come from behind because they don't want to throw the ball at all. So this is one of the most interesting games to me on the entire slate. It's not quite as sexy as some of the other top 5 matchups might be, but these are 2 good football teams. I think I'd agree with you, Eric, just from a spot, a number, with everything that's going on. I don't think I'd want to lay it with Oregon State. I'd be more inclined to play Washington State here at home and take them plus the 3 in this one. Couple more games to discuss. Perhaps the biggest game of the weekend. We have Notre Dame and Ohio State. Ohio State heading to Notre Dame. The last 5 times these teams have played, Ohio State has won all 5 of them by double digits. But this is why Hartman is here. He's here for these types of games. Interesting, though, not very good under pressure. I mean, a lot of quarterbacks aren't as good under pressure, but clean pocket is a 91 grade. Under pressure, 44.3. This offensive line does have a weak spot or two for Notre Dame. They have maybe the best offensive lineman in the country, or one of them. He has not allowed a pressure in 107 pass blocking snaps. The other 4 are fine. They just haven't played some of the talent that Ohio State has on the defensive side. But Notre Dame does have the highest graded running back in the country based on Pro Football Focus metrics.
Former Michigan State recruit.
There we go, right? Can they stop the run, though? I think what you have to do is line up to stop the run, make the young quarterback, the unproven guy, McCord, try to beat you, because he's still young. He hasn't done a whole lot yet. They've allowed the lowest passer rating in the nation this year, 50.9, and only a 50% completion percentage has the Notre Dame defense. So we look at McCord, who's now the full-time starter. It was a little better last week, but they played a bad defense in Western Kentucky. And the one metric that sort of stood out to me when I was doing some of my handicapping, I think I heard this on the Bet the Board podcast. He's 11 for 29 on throws 10 plus yards down the field is McCord. So if he has to make, and think about that, that's with the best wide receivers in the country.
I mean, when I was looking at this game, and I'll be honest, I got this a little earlier.
It was 7.
It was
on the look ahead.
7 at the look ahead. Then when it reopened, it was like 4, 3.5. I got it at 3.5.
And I would be fine at 3 or over. Obviously, you look for the best number you could find, but even down to 3.5, I'd still be okay taking Notre Dame. I think that's where you're going. So Go ahead.
Day as a favorite versus a top 20 team, only 29% ATS. McCord, the quarterback for Ohio State, as you mentioned, has struggled, looks a little lost back there. This is the same Notre Dame defense with the same defensive philosophy, concept, play caller that held the 2nd pick overall in the NFL draft, with more talent at the wide receiver position, to 220 yards passing last year in the horseshoe at Ohio State. Notre Dame's averaging 8.3 yards per carry. Is Ohio State really, everyone's talking about Hartman, are they going to be able to stop the rush? Are they going to be able to win the point of attack at the line? I don't think they're going to be able to. Hartman averaging 304 with the defense that NC State's DC, whose name I'm spacing on, of course, plays. Hartman historically has struggled against it. Back part of the game, he kind of figured it out. He is here for games like these, I don't think Ohio State's defense is going to be able to get a stop. And I don't think McCord is going to be able to lead them on those drives, even though they have Harrison, who arguably could be the best player on the field. I like Notre Dame's defense. I like them to be able to get to McCord. That's going to lead to some mistakes, some turnovers, and I just don't think Ohio State's going to be able to stop the running game.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one too. Again, as Eric pointed out, the number moved a bunch, right? So hopefully you were able to either get on the right side of it or you can get the best of it that you can, because it's not about just picking winners and losers in these games. It is really about trying to be on the right side of numbers and getting value, especially if you're doing this consistently. So I like Notre Dame too in this spot. I really do. I need to see more from McCord. Honestly, like I just need to see him do it more. And I haven't seen him do it against inferior opposition. This is a good Notre Dame team. This really is. They've got legitimate talent at the quarterback and the running back position. They've got legitimate linemen up front. And overall, I think their defense has been better and a little farther ahead than I am expected. I will say, I'm a USC fan. Everybody knows that. It's basically like how scared I am of Notre Dame every year, that like how good I think they are. I'm terrified of Notre Dame this year, man. They have a really good quarterback who can make plays. They have a running back. They could beat you in that direction. And I think the defense is a little bit better than I thought it was going to be. So I do like them in this spot. At anything over a field goal, I'd still be willing to take them. It's not, again, you don't always want to do that. But based on the line that I would have set this game at, it would have been closer to that to begin with, versus where it was. That's the thing.
And also, like pre-flop, Ohio State gets a lot of love.
Absolutely.
Alabama gets a lot of love. These numbers are a little inflated.
And they had the quarterback issues, right? They weren't exactly sure what they were going to do with the quarterback. They hadn't named a starter till later in the season. Just right there on that alone, in a close game, you've got one of the most experienced quarterbacks in college versus a very inexperienced quarterback, right? Yeah. And it could come down to that late in the game if it's a close game and you've got McCord needing to go on a game-winning drive, or you've got Hartman needing to go on a game-winning drive. Where do you feel a little bit more comfortable?
Oh, Hartman
especially McCord on the road at Notre Dame, having to make a big throw or two there. So I agree with you. We're both on the Notre Dame side here. Let's finish up, Eric, in the college world. Penn State, Iowa. I have a question for you on this game. Will there be points scored? I mean, it's a big number for two teams that don't have fantastic offenses, right? That would be my only way of looking at this game. Penn State's 9-0-1 ATS in their last 10, and they've scored 30 points in 10 straight. But example, like last week, they scored 30 because their opponent had four interceptions in that game. It wasn't as if their offense was humming. Their offensive line also not fantastic. And they're going to line up against an Iowa defense that's pretty good. But for Iowa, this was supposed to be like the quarterback and the year that they were going to be a little better offensively. It was supposed to be that way. They were going to be more explosive, Eric. They only have a 53% completion percentage. The offense is the 11th lowest in all of Power 5 on EPA per play. They're bottom 10 in rushing grade, and they're bottom 10 in receiving grade of all Power 5 teams. And, Penn State just forced 5 turnovers against a better Illinois offense. And they have injuries to their tight end. 2 of their running backs are out. Their defensive metrics are amazing. They're fantastic, but they've played 0 quality of offenses. Like Iowa State was one of the teams they've played in horrible offenses. So they grade out really, really well. I just don't have much positive to say about either of these offenses. That's what would scare me about a big number in a game like this.
McNamara has not looked great. How is he going to deal in Happy Valley?
Right.
What's going to happen? This is going to be Iowa's biggest defensive test. Penn State's offensive line is a legit offensive line. They have a great 2-headed monster in the running back. This is going to be Aller's best test for Penn State, who's their quarterback. And, I'm here looking, everyone thinks the Iowa State coach, Space and Friends, probably covers a lot. Dog of 10 or more. He's only 29% ATS. That shows you that Iowa's offense just doesn't have the firepower
they don't.
to be able to connect with these big names. Obviously, I think
I don't think the quarterback's 100% healthy either right now.
But,
like he doesn't look, he's not physically looking great out there. And it's hard, man.
One way to kind of look at it is like this. Most people's initial read is going to be like, oh, let's go to the under.
Yeah.
But you have one quarterback with experience who's not playing good, another quarterback inexperienced, best defense they've played.
I don't like the Penn State offensive line turnovers, right? Defensive scores
that
quickly.
Could lead to some defensive scores to get this total over.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, this is just the fade.
I don't touch this. I don't touch this with the 10-foot pole. Yeah. It's interesting because it just, you feel like one of these years, like Iowa can't ever get any sort of offense at all. Like they can't ever get any sort of offensive semblance, but a fantastic Saturday slate of games. Make sure you head to DRF Sportsbook to get involved in all these Saturday college football games. Eric, let's move on over. Let's start talking some NFL. What we'll do, you've got your 3 best bets. I've got my 3 best bets, and then we'll come together. We'll talk about Sunday Night Football and the 2 Monday Night Football games. Where do we start, Eric? We start, where is the love? Where is the love? You're going to ride with some Jordan Love this week and the Packers as a slight favorite.
I'm looking at it right now. The floor is 21-11 ATS at home. That's 65.6% as a favorite. 19-11, 63.3%. All coaches, LaFleur is the 4th most profitable coach ATS in the league. Dennis Allen as a dog is only 42.5% ATS, one of the least most profitable coaches in the league. One thing Derek Carr has shown us throughout his career is on the road, he's not good and he can't cover a game. More interceptions, less touchdowns, less yards, completion percentage is down. Saints are playing on a short week, traveling to Green Bay. All I hear everyone talking about is how good the Saints defense is playing. They gave up 5 yards a carry to the Carolina Panthers. They gave up 4.3 yards per carry to the Titans.
Week 1, they should have lost to the Titans when Tannehill had 3 interceptions. He had 2 touchdown passes where he completely overthrew wide open receivers.
And if Bryce Young is out and Andy Dalton plays that game, Panthers
they probably win.
Panthers are winning that game. The big news is obviously Aaron Jones is going to be there. This is going to help the rushing attack. This is going to open up stuff for Love. I think the Packers are going to have success running the ball on the Saints team. Flip side, the way to attack this Packers team is what? Running the ball. Kamara still suspended. Williams is going to be out for the game. So what? Are you going to just run Wildcat with Taysom Hill and have Jones back there? I don't.
You got Jones and a banged up Kendre Miller, who's going to probably be playing his first game of the year, coming off of injury,
or Taysom Hill and the Wildcat. So I don't think they're going to be able to take advantages of the defensive issues that the Packers have. Look, I know there's this trend that seems to be getting a lot of steam with a team that's been on the road, first game home, week 3. I'm not buying that trend. I'm looking at the stats and I'm looking at the fact the Saints have had a hard time stopping the run. So I'm going to take one of the better rushing attacks with that 2-headed monster. I'll take them minus the 1.5. I
backed the Falcons last week, who the Packers lost to. It was a weird game because first off, the Packers were without Aaron Jones and Watson and Bakhtiari, and they also had an injury to their left guard Jenkins. And then they get up early. They drop 2 interceptions, one that would have been a pick 6. But the Falcons have a couple weird things happen too, where like the Falcons could have scored another touchdown that got overturned. The Falcons could have had another first down that a pass got bobbled a little bit. It was just weird. What I took out of the game, I did like Love. He passes the eye test. It's sort of weird. He doesn't, on some of the metrics, he doesn't come out and multiple ones quite as good. But he's been better than that, I think, when you're watching him. And I think that's kind of who he is, right? He's not going to be a pinpoint accurate quarterback who just completes a really, really high percentage of passes, but the dude can make some plays. Like he's a big guy that can make some fantastic plays and he can sort of get hot. He kind of reminds me of like an NBA player that can really heat up. like one of those scorers who can have like 40 and 50-point game, like a Donovan Mitchell type player, you know what I mean? Who can just start cooking you. And when he does, he'll get really, really good, but he's just not overly accurate all the time. And remember, they're without Jones, they were without Watson. So late in the game, that's when their offense struggled because they didn't have playmakers around. They didn't have their go-to guys. Dillon's struggled a little bit the last couple of years when he's been the main guy. He hasn't had very much burst. And the difference between him and Jones are just the complementing pieces they are. I'm totally with you on this one. We're both on the Packers side here. Let's move to my next game, Eric. I'm going to go to the Broncos. We're doing it. We're going to the Broncos and Russell Wilson. They are 0-2, and they are heading to Miami to play a team that's getting a lot of buzz. Like everybody's jumping on Miami again. The same thing happened last year. Miami's been fantastic offensively. They're very, very good. Tua's 5-0 against Belichick. It's the first time since 2001, though, that Miami is 2-0, and we don't know what's up with Waddle. Now, defensively, I think they may have a little bit of a tough time. You know, this Broncos offense is actually much better than people, I think, are talking about it as and kind of giving them credit. You know, the Broncos offense week 1 was really, really good overall. And then week 2, but they just didn't have a lot of possessions. That was why they didn't score a ton. And then week 2, they were fantastic in the first half. And then in the second half, they were just bad. And they got a little cute here and there. But their defense is really where they've been struggling, Eric. I look at this team. You pointed out some really good stuff about 0-2 teams straight up and against the spread. Hopefully we can get rid of some of the dumb penalties they had. It was the second game in a row where they had a late penalty by Kareem Jackson. He got ejected. They lost both games by less than 2 points. It was the first time since 1993 a new head coach, 1933, a new head coach lost each of the first 2 games by 2 points or less. I feel like this is just sort of one of those games where you've got an 0-2 team and a 2-0 team. And the 0-2 team isn't quite as bad as people are making it out to be. I think because of what happened last year with Russ, with Hackett, everybody wants to pile on, and that Peyton came in. And then the Dolphins, I mean, the Dolphins very easily could have lost to the Chargers week 1 in a back and forth game. Last week, the Dolphins got the benefit of multiple turnovers early in the game, and then late in the game, things got really close again for the Patriots. It is not as if Miami has won both of their games by 20-plus points, Eric. They're getting talked about like they have, and they're not quite there yet. And they haven't shown that on the field, and Denver's been better than people think. This feels to me a point or two too high. I'm on the Broncos side here at plus the 6.5.
Yeah, I got the 6.5 too. I love it too. I think this is a good Javonte Williams bounce back game. Historically speaking, for the 2 games they've played, they do struggle against the run. Howard and Apple graded out very low PFF. Also, there looks like there's rain in the forecast. This could slow down the field a little bit and greatly favor the Broncos. Also, we don't know if Waddle's going to be playing either.
Eric, your next game, heading to the Colts. So you're my guy, Minshew Mania. You're back in the Minch, man. Minshew Mania, because they did, I believe, say that Anthony Richardson is now going to be out of this game. He left in the first quarter. But what we saw them do last week, which was really nice, they ran the ball much better overall as a team. 18 carries, 88 yards. And Minshew came in, finished 19 of 23 for 171 yards and a touchdown. He was graded quarterback number 4 on the week. He led 2 touchdown drives by 75-plus yards in the first half, put the Colts up by 18. We were just talking about Washington State. That was the kind of thing he did at Washington State. Short, accurate stuff. Like, if you give him some time, he's a very accurate passer. He just has a ceiling of very good backup, not necessarily a franchise quarterback. You know, that's who he is. Talk about why you like the Colts here.
Ravens injuries. They have 7 players that are not going to be playing on on Sunday. And the main thing is the offensive line. I think this defensive line of the Colts is very good. I think they're going to be able to disrupt. I think they're going to be able to get to Lamar Jackson, and this offense that they're still installing to me just hasn't looked good. Lamar still struggles throwing to the outside, still struggles throwing down deep on the field. Flip side, Minshew is Minshew. He's not going to turn the ball over. We're not going to get the explosive runs, but we're not going to get the sloppy throws. We're going to get a more experienced quarterback.
Much more accurate throwing
to the spots. Going to be able to take advantage of not having Humphreys, not having Williams, not having those guys in the back four. Get Michael Pittman, get Pierce. Those guys more involved. Jackson, 17-25. That's 40% ATS as a favorite. Home favorite that dips down to 37.9%. Look, he's starting to turn into Patrick Mahomes, where he's this quarterback that covers when he's a dog or a small favorite. Anything over 3, he really struggles. So, I'm going to take the Colts here. I'm going to take the 7.5. I'm
going to move to Vrabel. Got to go back to Vrabel again when you're getting the points here and more than a field goal. He's just fantastic in this situation. You gave me the stat, 62.5% as a dog ATS. And the Titans should have won week 1 against the Saints. Tannehill was awful in that game. He really, really cost them there. Week 2, they come back and they win. And the box score was great for them. They had slightly more first down, pretty even in total plays, total yards per. They were able to run the ball 141 yards, and the Chargers just 61. I know this team, they have an identity. They want to run. They're good at stopping the run. And if Tannehill is able to just make a few plays here and there, like we saw him do last week, this is a good football team. Like, this is an above average football team. They're very well coached. They don't make a lot of mistakes. And now we have some issues with the Cleveland offensive line and the Cleveland running game overall, because they don't have Chubb there. They don't have Conklin. So that well-oiled machine with that great line and that great back and all that familiarity isn't quite there. Also going to be coming back on a short week. Have not been impressed with Watson all that much. One point that you made when we talked about this game a little more in depth, I do worry about maybe the let's win one for Chubb, the Browns sort of getting up for their teammate that's a beloved teammate that had a bad injury that could be really, really bad for his career prospects. But watching them on the field, I do like this matchup quite a bit for Tennessee, because the Browns offense just really hasn't figured it out yet. They scored 2 touchdowns on 14 possessions. Watson, since taking over, he is quarterback 39 in sack rate. There's only 32 teams. So we're talking about teams, multiple guys on teams have better sack rates than him. Yeah. One of the biggest complaints that Baker always had from the Cleveland fans, and just overall, Baker holds the ball too long. He runs into sacks sometimes. Watson's been doing that repeatedly now. So I think it's a nice spot for the Titans. I wouldn't even be shocked if Cleveland were to win this game, but if you're giving me over the field goal here, that's where I would definitely buy in, and the buy-in point. So I took the Titans plus 3.5 here, Eric.
Yeah, I'm not doing anything with this game. I'm just kind of, sitting back and kind of waiting.
Fantasy-wise, you expect Ford to be the guy. It's not going to be Hunt right away, right? Or what do you think?
I expect Ford to be the guy. I expect Cooper to do well. Titan, it's just kind of weird. Like, both these teams are good against the run. It's whatever wide receivers are going to be making the most.
Yeah. I think that's sort of why I took the extra half that you're getting me here. Feels like a game that could just be a close game, get a little advantage there with a team and a coach that's very good in situations just like this. Eric, you go to the Texans, and they will be in a game where we have a couple of offensive lines that have both been struggling, that have both been banged up a little bit. The Texans, I think last week, were without 4 offensive linemen, but their offense and their quarterback, I've been impressed with. Even with those issues, he's still been able to throw the ball well, and he's connecting pretty well with their receivers. This is just, to me, and I guess obviously to you too, too many points for a team that hasn't looked all that great offensively to be laying.
Yeah, I'm on the Texans here. It's just, to me, it's just the spot of spots to to take them. Divisional dogs, 54% ATS. Divisional road dogs, first 3 weeks of the season, 57%. Divisional dogs getting over 7 first 3 weeks of the season, 58%. Teams in week 3 that are 0-2 and 0-2 ATS are 63 and 42. That's a 60% ATS. I have a million trends that I could just read off here about this. When they are a road dog, it's 59%. Oh, sorry. When they're a road dog, it's 66.7%, 34 and 17. When they're playing a team that's 2-0 and 2-0 ATS, that even jumps up a little bit more. I haven't been impressed with the Jaguars. Look,
Me neither at all.
They should have lost.
Not at all.
They should have beat the Chiefs. Offensive line continues to be an issue for them. Taylor, they lost in free agency. He's a hole on one side. Robinson suspended. Harrison is over his head. I expect Ryan's going to come up with this defensive matchup to exploit Harrison on that side in terms of the passing game. Thomas and Nelson for the Texans are 2 of the top 3 of the highest graded PFF DBs. I think they're going to match up well with the Jaguars. Peterson historically doesn't cover these big numbers. 41% ATS laying 3 or more. Stroud, look, he has the fourth most passing yards in the NFL.
With no offensive line, and he's throwing to veteran like NFL wide receivers, but he hasn't got like a number 1 guy out there, no. Right? He's throwing to Bobby Trees, Nico Collins.
Exactly. I just think it is. I just think it's a great matchup. I think it's a great bounce back spot.
The Jags offensive line really struggling. They've allowed 25% of their dropbacks to be pressured, and they've allowed sacks. They had 18 total first downs on 11 drives last week. They couldn't score a touchdown from first and goal on the 1. They turned it over on downs twice in the game. They went 0 of 3 on scoring touchdowns in the red zone. They only had 271 yards and 4.2 yards per play. They were given 3 points in that game when Kansas City muffed a punt return. And the defensive line is where I've been more disappointed with the Jags in rewatching their games, because they have some top-tier talent there on the defensive line, Eric, but they're not getting enough impactful plays. Even when they get pressure, it's not like pressure that's leading to sacks, and it's not impacting the opposing quarterback as much as it should with the picks and the amount that they spent on the defensive line. So the trenches, man, that's one thing that you and I really hit on a lot, and you've hit on it a lot, and you've made me become a lot more aware of teams in the trenches. And when your offensive line and your defensive line right now, you're having some issues with and your concerns, you're probably not going to look great out on the field.
No, not at all. Not at all. I just think this is just a great spot. I'm just low on this Jaguars team.
Okay, Eric, let's move to the final few games of the weekend. I've got my best bet, and then we'll get to Sunday Night Football and the 2 Monday Night Football games. I know nobody wants to play Justin Fields this week. Justin Fields talking about how he's inside of his own head. It's a coaching thing now. But when you're watching him, it's exactly what it looks like. It looks like a guy who's sort of been told, or is like telling himself, don't run. Don't take off and run. And he like drops back for a second and he looks around, and then it's like, there's no one there real quick. And then he just sort of takes a sack. It's been ugly. It has been ugly. They have not completed one pass between 10 and 19 yards, like an intermediate pass. They've got a couple big ones and then all short. But like, if you need to pick up 3rd and 7, they don't got a 10-yard gain. Not one so far, which is just crazy to think about. He had 6 sacks last week. I like the fact that they got more involved. Oh, attaboy. And Fields is going to run this week. You just know he's going to. He talked about it. This is exactly what happened last year. The first few games, they tried to make him into this drop back passer. He's not. Does Fields need to become a better thrower? Absolutely. Should they ever try to run an offense? Should anyone ever try to run an offense with Justin Fields where you're not having him run? No. It doesn't make any sense. You're taking away his biggest strength. Eric, they have like no design runs at all this year. Why wouldn't you do that? You've got to mix some of them in because then it makes it easier for him to make those throws when he has to. I've just been really disappointed overall with the Bears coaching again. And it's like new coaching that we saw last year go through the same thing and make these adjustments. But the number is too big now. It's gotten too big. And mainly when I look at Kansas City, this isn't the same Kansas City offense that we've seen. They don't have Hill. Kelsey is not 100% yet. They brought him back last week and they needed him last week because he made a play for them. But of 96 starts that Patrick Mahomes has had, this was their worst success rate ever last week in a game offensively. The 2 games they've had this year, they had a lower success rate on offensive plays than in any game they had last year. Already twice this year. They had 3 turnovers in the first half. They only had 19 total first downs, 12 penalties for 94 yards. Those are all things that may add up in a game where you're a heavy favorite. Where if you're up by 17 points and the Bears score a garbage touchdown, I cover.
Yeah.
Like that's where the situation is right now where, the Chiefs, Tony fumbled on a screen pass. The receivers fumbled 3 times last week. They had a ton of drops 2 weeks ago. So this isn't that KC Chiefs team that's doing everything right. They're leaving so much meat on the bone right now. And for me, if they flub up and have a couple mistakes like that too, I'm in line to cover this big number.
Yeah, I got it a little bit at 13.
Yeah.
Mahomes 27, 35-1, 43% ATS. Home favorite 7 or more, 14, 20-1, 41% ATS, double digits, 35%. Historically, he just doesn't cover these big numbers. I don't think this offense really looks right for the Chiefs. I think they've kind of struggled in their games. They could easily and should be 0-2. I think that Bieniemy played a bigger role in this offense.
That's a great point.
We're realizing.
We all just said, oh, it's Andy Reid and it's Mahomes and they'll be fine. There'll be no problem at all. But, it's Nagy who's over there, the former Bears guy, right?
And historically, he's just not that good of a coach.
No.
Don't mean to be mean.
But yeah, we've seen this story before.
I'll definitely lean to the Bears. I got him at plus 13.
Bears. Here we go. Eric, Sunday Night Football. So it's the Raiders and the Steelers. And right now the Raiders are a 3-point favorite. They're at home. Steelers going on the road. Last week, the Steelers win a game on Monday Night Football against the Browns. They had -7 yards of offense in the fourth quarter. Pittsburgh. They did not run one play the entire game in the red zone. They only had 9 first downs and they won. That was a textbook Mike Tomlin game, huh? Just a total Mike Tomlin win. And I think at 3, I would be on the Steelers side more than on the Raiders side here, because with both of these teams, the one thing I trust is the Steelers defense. That's the one thing I trust. I don't trust their offense yet. Blame Canada. He's been awful, terrible. Kenny Pickett has not looked as good as I had hoped. Eric, they can't run the ball really on offense. Johnson being hurt really does impact their offense a little bit, but their defense is good. On the Raiders side, they got torched defensively by the Bills last week. I don't really trust their defense. And then offensively, Jimmy G isn't even targeting Renfro. He doesn't know one of his better receivers whatsoever. They can't run the ball at all. Adams was being monitored for a concussion post-game. Myers already was out for a concussion last week. And Josh Jacobs had -2 yards on 9 carries last week, the fewest rushing yards in a single game by a reigning rushing leader since 1950. As a team, they had 55 yards rushing because they had one run from Tucker that went 34 yards.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I don't want anything to do with this game. I'm probably not going to bet it at at all. Fun thing here, there's only one team in the NFL that has less red zone appearance than the Chicago Bears. Do you tend to guess who it is?
Steelers.
The Steelers.
That's great. Yeah.
I just don't want anything. Maybe Wilson, the young kid from Tech that's on the defensive line, maybe play a sack prop for him. Maybe he get home against Pickett. I'm just not a buyer on the Steelers team. I'm just going to kind of sit this one out.
They're very, very, very disappointing.
I don't trust the Raiders to win with margin. So
no, yeah, they're disappointing. And coaching wise, I would definitely lean Tomlin in this matchup. So I'm leaning that at +3, but I can understand why you wouldn't necessarily want to get really confident either side. Monday Night Football, 2 more games this week on Monday Night Football. First up, Eric, it is the Eagles at the Tampa Bay Bucks. And shout out to Baker Mayfield. Baker is currently the number 3 graded quarterback through 2 games so far. Baker Mayfield is someone who I've kind of liked. And Eric, we've joked about him the last couple of years because you don't like him overall, and I do, and not do, but I sort of have had some fun with it. He played pretty poorly through the last part of Cleveland. He played really poorly in some spots last year in Carolina. A little better with McVay at the end of the year with the Rams, but man, this is like one of his better 2-game stretches ever. Just because he's not turning the ball over, he's not running into the sacks like we said, and he's just getting the ball to his really talented weapons. Mike Evans, you called that Mike Evans was going to have a big year. He has had a great year so far. Mike Evans had another fantastic game last week. And this Tampa Bay team is better than people thought. And the Eagles haven't looked quite as fluid as everybody thought through 2 games. They've been the benefit when both teams they've played have just given them turnovers gifted on a platter. Last week, it was the Vikings. One of the plays that we all remember, Jefferson was going in for a touchdown and he fumbled going in instead of scoring. That becomes a touchback. The ball goes to the Eagles. And instead of scoring 7, the Eagles get 3. 10-point swing in the game right there. 2 weeks ago, the Eagles were playing the Pats, and then the Pats turned the ball over on back-to-back plays. And all of a sudden, the Eagles are up 16-0. So while the Eagles, I still think, are one of the better teams in football, Eric, they have not looked incredibly impressive quite yet.
No, I took the Bucks here plus the 5. The Eagles have some injuries, especially in the back 4. You have Evans and Godwin tandem back there. I think they're going to be able to exploit that. Eagles have some young players in some real pivotal positions. That is really going to be an issue I think the Bucks are going to be able to take advantage of. Eagles offense and even their defense really hasn't looked quite right. I think this is because of the injuries, the young players, and the new coordinators that are calling plays. Hurts, happy feet in the box. I really don't like what I'm seeing from him back throwing the ball. You have Brown complaining about his targets, his place in the offense. I'm just a little bit concerned. Bucks are very good against the run. I think they're going to be able to limit the rushing game of the Eagles. Obviously, this is a Smith regression. Mayfield historically stares down his wide receiver, forces it into coverage. Bad throws lead to INTs. It's kind of like the step that he should have made 6-7 years ago is the step he's finally making this year. He's not turning the ball over. Stuff isn't there. He's either throwing away or running it. I think this is a tough matchup for the Eagles with how young the injuries. Let's go the Bucks plus the 5 for me.
I'm with you. We're on the Tampa side here. Cook that up, Baker. Cook it up, buddy. We get to the final game of the week. It's going to be Monday Night Football, and the Rammies have played really well through 2 games so far, and that has not been the case for the Cincinnati Bengals, who are hosting them. The Bengals are a 2.5-point favorite on Monday Night Football. Rams are a 2.5-point underdog there. Man, this Rams team, they played better than the 49ers did last week. They outplayed them. They scored on all 3 first-half possessions. They had 7 more first downs. They ran 24 more total plays, more total yards, better on third down, won the time of possession by 6.5 minutes, 2 turnovers. That was the difference in the game for the Rams. And they did all that without their best player, Cooper Kupp. So I've been pretty impressed with my Rammies, Eric. You tried to tell me that they were going to be better than I thought, and I was in the doghouse with them. I didn't know if they would win 4 or 5 games this year, but when you really start to look at it, and this was another point I'm stealing from you, they've got a really good football coach who covered for us last week. Thank you, Sean McVay, kicking that field goal late. It was for point differential. That's what the reasoning was. Hey, that makes sense to me. Point differential down the line. But they've got one of the best defensive players in the league. And they've got a really good veteran quarterback who, when he's healthy, he's still got something left. And Stafford's shown that. Now, all of a sudden, they got Puka Nacua. They've got some pieces here. I don't know what's going to happen with Burrow. I don't know if he's healthy. Do you have any type of play on this one? I've overall been a little bit more impressed with the Rams. I don't know if at 2.5 I'd play it. If this jumped up over a field goal, even with Burrow, I would have no problem playing the Rams at like plus 3.5 or whatever it would float up to be. But I'm not great in Cincinnati right now when Burrow's not healthy and they haven't looked good. And now they're both going to they're going to try to get right without a healthy Burrow.
Yeah. You don't know his status, but the fact they signed someone from the practice squad kind of lends to you to believe that he's not going to be playing. The back four of the Bengals has just been awful, graded out very bad this year. D-line isn't getting the push that it's gotten in years past. O-line has been graded awful. You have Aaron Donald. How are you going to be able to stop Aaron Donald? I don't know. I just kind of think it's a bad matchup. If Burrow plays, I'll buy the Rams because we're going to get a line, but this line was at 7. Yeah, I kind of feel I missed the value. I'll just kind of play the Bucs game and go from there.
Another NFL week ahead. College football just a few hours away from a big Saturday slate. We want to thank all of you for hanging out with us. We went a little longer this week because we had so many good college football games to dive on into. Eric, thank you, buddy, for all your hard work. As always, we'll see you back here next week on The Winning Ticket at 6:00 p.m. Eastern time. If you want to come hang out with me and Eric on Sunday morning to preview all of the Sunday football games, we'll be live on Twitter. You can follow Eric's Twitter at Etoff21, and then you can follow me on Twitter. It's me, Gino B, and we'll be streaming live there on Sunday morning, 11 a.m. for NFL Betting Blitz. Good luck this weekend, Eric, with everything, buddy.
You too, my man.
Good luck, everyone out there. Thanks so much for hanging out.